Domestic and International Strategies by Sean Bentley and Gabe Gomez. This presentation will help one to understand the key differences between a domestic strategy and an international strategy and highlight the need to be as thorough as possible when it comes to due diligence required when looking at an operation abroad. First off, it's important to note that when it comes to international business, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Success at home does not equate to success abroad. But you will find it's really the same type of due diligence that one will put forward when creating a new business domestically that is required in putting together a business plan to enter an international market. Within the domestic market, one generally seeks to obtain a solid grasp of the market, understand the risks involved, any legal hurdles, political risks, and consumer tastes and preferences. Understanding these, a company can then devise a strategy to successfully navigate these. One also needs to understand how they will approach entry into a market, and this will have much to do with the strategy employed. When it comes to an international market, for instance, an export-only strategy versus a WOFE would be vastly different. An exporter would consider things like branding, distribution channel, last-mile delivery, and local taste, whereas a WOFE would not only need to consider aspects pertaining to an exporter strategy, but they also need to think about other regulatory items, employees, human resources, office space, warehouses, just to name a few. Thus, as one's investment increases, the rule of thumb is, so does the amount of due diligence that is needed. Now, to help conduct the due diligence in a more thorough manner, there are several types of framework that we're going to look at throughout this presentation. The first of which is a SWOT analysis. A company will often conduct a SWOT analysis to understand where their firm sits in respect to its own capabilities and how it can best deal with outside threats and what opportunities exist within the market. Another classic example of framework used is Porter's 5 Forces model. This framework helps a firm to analyze 5 aspects at play within a market in which the company will operate. And these are the threat of new entrants. This will help a company understand what barriers to entry exist before going into a foreign country. The threat of substitutes, the bargaining power of suppliers, which is very important in regards to understanding just how much leverage your supply chain has over you when you enter into this market. The overall intensity of rivalry is one to be considered as well in regards to how many competitors exist within the market and your power of customers. By constantly analyzing each of these, a firm can develop and even course correct their strategy. As mentioned previously, the caution is that success in your home country does not equate to success in a foreign market. Both the SWOT analysis and Porter's 5 Forces framework will be vastly different between your home country and the foreign country. But what is really important here, and what we cannot emphasize enough, is due diligence. It needs to be thorough. It needs to be well executed. Domestically, one should already have a grasp of the many things that one encounters within their market. But all of this now needs to be placed within the context of a different culture, a different marketplace, a different legal system than one is accustomed to operating within. If these change, such as what occurs when you enter an international market, the company's strategy should also change along with that. Fortunately, the framework previously discussed, SWOT and Porter's 5 Forces, can be used in this. But again, the context will be vastly different as things like culture and legal system need to be considered alongside the framework. One cannot overemphasize as well the need to understand the culture that one will be operating within. Culture impacts everything that people do in a foreign country. This includes how business is conducted, how employees behave, how people buy things. As such, it will impact things like product packaging, advertising, hiring, and your approach to sales. What we're going to consider next are 3 examples of very large businesses that fail to fully conduct their due diligence and as a result had to exit their markets. Up first is Starbucks. Starbucks failed in Australia when they entered in 2000. The chain thought that Australians were indeed very much like Americans when it came to their coffee drinking habits. But Starbucks failed to realize the strong preference for local coffee shops and entered the market with a price point that was much too high for Australians to pallet. In 2014, they exited the market by selling the remaining stores to the operators of the local 7-Eleven chain. Target invested billions into its Canadian market expansion in 2003. They did this based on reports that Canadians had higher levels of discretionary income and the space they operate was seemingly wide open. After all, it was just a move to the north. What could go wrong? Well, they failed to perform their due diligence regarding securing a reliable supply chain and could not keep items in stock. There was also established competitors in the market, such as Walmart and Loblaws. Employees that were untenured also were unable to deal with the various issues that came up at the various targets that they were employed at. Lastly, Target failed to understand that the Canadian customer is influenced not just by the U.S., but rather their buying habits were a lot closer to that of Europeans. As a result, Target liquidated all 133 of their stores after several years of trying. Lastly is Home Depot. In 2006, Home Depot thought that the timing was right to enter the Chinese market and opened 12 stores. After all, the country was amid a growth spurt, and the housing market was booming in China. What Home Depot failed to understand is that the Chinese people see DIY projects as a sign of poverty. Home Depot has also struggled with this in other developing countries, as opposed to the U.S., where DIY is viewed as a hobby. In 2012, Home Depot shut down its stores in China. There's some common threads in all these failures. In each of these instances, these companies clearly had the capital. They were able to maneuver through many of the legal hurdles and other issues that are imposed as barriers to entry into a country, and reports seem to indicate that the opportunity was there. But they failed to fully conduct thorough due diligence and adjust their strategy as necessary. For instance, they failed to look at the major cultural disconnects that existed between the service and products they offered and the culture that existed. In Target's case, they failed to understand and fully vet their supply chain distributor and other logistical issues. What is key here is that it is equally important, if not more important, to understand the likes, dislikes, and the habits of end consumers and factor these in to the overall strategic plan. Now, one doesn't have to do this alone. There are many resources that help and that are readily available to help devise and craft a strategic business plan to enter a foreign market. As covered in this course, the value that exists from the local U.S. Embassy is one key resource that can be used. Those individuals or the embassy reps have a grasp on what's been successful and likely will have some insight on how to navigate the legal environment and what the local culture is like. One wants to invest the time necessary to meet with resources such as those that are available at the U.S. Embassy and others perhaps that are available from the federal government. There are also state and local resources that are available, and what's interesting is that many of these are free. All they take is your time, whether they be face-to-face, over the phone, or just navigating through the websites. They contain invaluable data that can help strategize and create a strategic plan. There are also private sector resources that are available. Most of these are for pay. Now, it's a caution on these that some of these may be somewhat biased, but in the end, it's your company, it's your taste for risk, and your future. So it's important to use them for information and feedback, but the strategic plan itself needs to be yours. One last framework that we'll take a look at is Dr. Bowen's 7 things to consider before entering a foreign market. This combined with a SWOT analysis and Porter's 5 forces, we feel can certainly help in developing a very effective strategic plan for operating within an international market. The first is, what is the market potential? And not so much in terms of disposable income, not so much in terms of rather population, but rather what is the level of disposable income that they have, coupled with the desire to buy your product. Number 2 is, what is the market access? Can you get the product into the market? What are the barriers to trade or entry into that country? These can be both legal and extra legal. Number 3, one needs to understand shipping costs and time. Now, as discussed earlier in our semester, is the use of freight forwarders. They can greatly simplify this, but it's important to understand this as well and factor this into your overall costs. And most importantly, though, is how are you going to get from the seaport to the customer? This last mile is indeed one of the most critical and overlooked things when it comes to company strategies internationally. Number 4 is potential competition. This is both foreign and domestic. One needs to look at total competition. One needs to even ask, are you creating this? If this competition doesn't exist, then you're really paving the way for others to do this domestically, likely at a lower price point than what you can offer. Number 5 is the service requirements. What kind of service does your product require? Do you need training to supply training for it? Do you need to install it? Are people available readily within that country to do that for you? Or will you bring it back to your domestic country and do the servicing there? Number 6 is the product fit. So this is to what degree the product needs to be modified to fit the local requirements. This indeed is the cultural aspect that you need to look at. And number 7 is how do you get paid? It's not just about getting the product into the market, but you must get it into the hands of the consumers, and above all, you need to get paid. So in conclusion, no one size fits all. One's domestic strategy will differ possibly even wildly from an international strategy. Just because others have failed does not mean you will. If you use the various frameworks that exist in the context of the foreign country that you wish to enter the market, this will be very helpful in devising your international strategic business plan. You want to enlist outside assistance and be willing and open to course correction in crafting your strategic plan. Take the time needed to conduct detailed due diligence. Yes, while there's never a guarantee of success in any business venture, following these steps will help ensure your international venture is not later studied in an MBA program as a failure. Thanks for watching.